Dear followers, we are back. And what better story than attacks from the USA into a neighbouring country? I doubt that would happen today. It would be too silly, wouldn't it? Yes or no? Would it? Oh well, neither the present nor the future is my domain. I do prefer the past. Let's get started. The 19th century. A time of grand ambitions, questionable tactics, and humanity's extraordinary ability to repeat its mistakes. Among the more audacious schemes of this era, we find the Fenian Raids, a series of cross-border escapades launched by Irish-American veterans of the US Civil War into what we now call Canada, a proud and sovereign state. Their aim? To bring Britain to its knees and free Ireland. Ambitious, yes. Successful? Well, that's another story. The Fenians were not just dreamers, they were fighters. Irish immigrants hardened by the brutal realities of the American Civil War. These veterans believed they could leverage Canada, then a British colony, as a pawn in their bid for Irish independence. Many were fueled by deep resentment toward Britain, their ancestral oppressor, and a sense of urgency to avenge the injustices inflicted upon Ireland. Their plan was audacious on paper: invade Canada, take territory, and use it as a bargaining chip to force Britain's hand. But bold plans often meet harsh realities. Among these determined fighters stood John O'Neill, a man whose life was marked by ambition and fervour. Born in Ireland in 1834, O'Neill immigrated to the United States as a young man, where he found himself caught in the storm of the American Civil War. Rising to the rank of cavalry officer, O'Neill gained a reputation for his leadership and bravery on the battlefield. But for O'Neill, the war was not just about preserving the Union, it was training for a greater mission, the liberation of Ireland. After the Civil War, O'Neill channeled his military experience into the Fenian Brotherhood, quickly becoming a prominent leader. Charismatic and deeply committed, he believed that seizing Canada could force Britain to negotiate Ireland's independence. His confidence was matched only by his determination. But as history would show, determination alone could not overcome the many challenges he would face. Thomas D'Arcy McGee, on the other hand, represented a different path. Born in Ireland in 1825, McGee was a passionate advocate for Irish nationalism in his youth. But his perspective evolved over time. Disillusioned by the failures of violent uprisings, he emigrated to North America, where he became a journalist, poet and politician. McGee's vision shifted from Irish independence to the creation of a harmonious, multicultural society in Canada. He saw Confederation as a way to protect the fledgling nation from external threats, including the Fenians. McGee's eloquence and intellect earned him a place in Canada's political leadership, where he championed the idea of unity among Canada's diverse populations. However, his vocal opposition to the Fenian Raids and his calls for peace made him a target. In 1868, McGee was tragically assassinated by a suspected Fenian sympathiser, cementing his legacy as a martyr for Canadian unity. And then there was William Randall Roberts, a man who straddled the line between revolutionary and politician. Born in Ireland in 1830, Roberts immigrated to the United States and became deeply involved in the Fenian Brotherhood. He served as the organization's president during its most active years and was a key proponent of using Canada as leverage against Britain. Unlike O'Neill, Roberts sought to combine military action with political influence. Roberts's leadership was marked by internal divisions within the Brotherhood. But his political ambitions did not end with the Fenian Raids. He transitioned into American politics, serving as a US congressman from New York between 1871 and 1875. Roberts' career illustrates the blurred lines between revolutionary ideals and pragmatic governance. Between 1866 and 1871, the Fenian Brotherhood carried out 5 raids into British North America, each with varying degrees of planning and success. The first and most significant raid took place in June 1866. Led by John O'Neill, approximately 800 Fenian soldiers crossed the Niagara River into Ontario, capturing Fort Erie and clashing with Canadian forces at the Battle of Ridgeway, marking Canada's first combat experience under its own flag. This short-lived victory ended in retreat when British reinforcements arrived, marking a bold but ultimately failed attempt to seize Canadian territory. Shortly after Ridgeway, another group of Fenians launched a raid from Malone, New York, into Quebec. This incursion was quickly repelled by British forces, highlighting the limits of the Fenians' strategy. Smaller skirmishes, like the Missisquoi County raid in Quebec later that year, were similarly poorly organized and resulted in little more than embarrassment for the Brotherhood. In May 1870, the Fenians tried again, crossing the border near Franklin, Vermont, and heading into Quebec during the Pigeon Hill Raid. Around 200 men participated, but they were swiftly met by Canadian militia. Many Fenians were captured, and the raid collapsed within days. These failures underscored the dwindling resources and waning support for the Fenian cause. The final chapter came in October 1871 with the Manitoba Raid. Once again, led by John O'Neill, the Fenians aimed to disrupt British influence in the Red River settlement. However, the plan fell apart before it began. Finally, O'Neill was arrested by US authorities for violating neutrality laws, and the raid ended in failure. This marked the end of the Fenian Raids, with the Brotherhood's ambitions never realized. 5 raids in 5 years. From Ontario to Quebec to Manitoba, the Fenians attempted to disrupt British control over Canada, but each time they were met with failure. The most significant legacy of these raids was not Irish independence, but the unintended consequences. Canadian Confederation was accelerated, Canadian nationalism was strengthened, and the raids highlighted the vulnerabilities along the US-Canada border. The Fenians failed to achieve their ultimate goal, but their actions reshaped North American history in unexpected ways. Despite their failure, the Fenians inspired fear and political upheaval. The raids revealed Canada's vulnerabilities, igniting debates about the necessity of unification and a shared defence strategy. The raids also heightened tensions between the US and Britain. Britain and Canada accused the United States of turning a blind eye to Fenian activities. While some American leaders sympathized with the Irish cause, others saw the Fenians as a liability, leading to enforcement of the Neutrality Act and eventual arrests of key leaders like O'Neill. The unintended consequence of the raids was the acceleration of Canadian Confederation in 1867. Politicians like Thomas D'Arcy McGee argued passionately for unification, framing it as essential for survival against external threats. As mentioned earlier, McGee, a former Irish nationalist, had evolved into a staunch advocate for Canadian unity and peace. Tragically, his opposition to the Fenian cause would lead to his assassination in 1868 by a suspected Fenian sympathizer. The Confederation united the provinces into a single dominion of Canada, strengthening their ability to defend against future threats. It marked a turning point in Canadian history, transforming a collection of colonies into a nation with a shared identity. The Fenians, unwittingly, had become midwives to this national birth. For the Irish diaspora, the raids showcased their determination but also their limitations. The Fenians' actions reflected the broader struggles of Irish nationalism, which would later shift toward political solutions under figures like Charles Parnell. Meanwhile, in the US, the raids exposed the challenges of balancing domestic politics with international diplomacy. Challenges USA hardly have today in this modern world. They must have gotten smarter, not mixing up domestic politics with international diplomacy, would they? Well, let's move on. The English crown viewed the raids as a symptom of a larger Irish discontent that extended across the empire. While the raids failed militarily, they signalled the growing pressure on Britain to address Irish grievances. This tension would simmer until Ireland's eventual push for independence decades later. John O'Neill, the charismatic Fenian leader, ended his life in obscurity. After the repeated failures, his reputation diminished, and he passed away in 1878, a forgotten figure in Nebraska. William Randall Roberts, another key leader, transitioned into politics, serving as a US congressman from New York. Can you imagine a man that have participated in illegal activities such as this being elected to the Congress today? I doubt that would happen. Well, let's wrap this up. Meanwhile, Thomas D'Arcy McGee's legacy endured as one of Canada's founding fathers, though he paid the ultimate price for his opposition to the Fenians. The legacy of the Fenian Raids is complex. They strengthened Canadian nationalism, strained US-British relations, and highlighted the global reach of Irish nationalism. Cross-border insurgencies and diaspora politics are nothing new. The Fenian Raids remind us of the enduring power of ideology to transcend borders. Perhaps the greatest lesson of the Fenian Raids is this: nationalism, when wielded recklessly, often creates as many problems as it solves. Bold ideals must be tempered by strategy and realism. History may not always repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes. This concludes my tale of nationalism, raids between neighbours, and the delicate dance of mixing domestic politics with diplomacy. History never ceases to amaze and teach us, even as we repeat its mistakes. I will soon be back with more insightful stories from the past. In the meantime, please like, comment, share and subscribe to our channel for more captivating history and analysis.